The shocking truth about Deuteronomy, a dark revelation you must see at 3 a.m. The clock struck 3, a haunting chime that echoed through the empty halls of the old church. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting and turning like spirits trapped between worlds. Something was wrong. Terribly, dreadfully wrong. As the moon hung high, almost mocking the silence outside, a chilling rumor flickered through the town. Something in Deuteronomy, a book known for its age and mystery, was awakening. The first hint came when the librarian found that ancient text open on the floor, the pages flapping lightly as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. It was never meant to be read at this hour, she whispered, eyes wide with fear. The whispers grew, bouncing around the town like whispers in the night. People spoke of intentions hidden in plain sight, codes buried within each line. They said unearthly sounds could be heard in the fields, the kind that gripped your heart and made you freeze in your tracks. It was terrifying yet impossible to look away. Every eye turned to the light that flickered in the church, the glow dim and unsteady. Folks knew not to enter, but curiosity gnawed at the edges of their minds. A group gathered outside, their breaths visible in the frigid air, as they exchanged nervous glances. "Did you hear about the animals acting strange?" A woman gasped. She gripped her friend's arm, her voice shrill. "They say the llamas, of all creatures, stopped bleeding altogether." "What does that mean?" As they stood, a sudden chill swept over them. The townsfolk recoiled as a shriek cut through the night. It was a sound that felt like it clawed at their insides, a desperate cry for help. What had woven its way into their lives, creeping from the pages of that ancient book? Their hearts raced and fear coiled in their stomachs. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Just as the whispers reached a fever pitch, the church doors creaked open. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, shadows wrapping around him like a cloak. His eyes glinted with a strange light that seemed to pierce through the dark. "You don't know what you're about to face," he warned, voice a low rasp that sent chills down their spines. "Deuteronomy is calling its own, and you might not be prepared for what it wants." As the crowd shifted uncomfortably, drawn in by fear but desperate to escape, the question hung in the air: what awaited them in the pages of that dark book? The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, as if even the very night was holding its breath. The stranger stepped fully into the light, revealing a face etched with lines of worry and a mouth set in a grim line. The townsfolk gaped, unsure whether to flee or be drawn into the strange aura that surrounded him. He clenched his fists, trembling slightly as if battling an unseen force. "What's the matter?" he sneered, the flickering shadows contorting around him. "Are you afraid of the truth?" A rustle in the crowd broke the tension. A man's voice, shaky yet resolute, called out, "What do you know about this book?" "The legends say it was cursed." The question hung thick in the air, and a collective shudder ran through those gathered. As a sense of dread settled heavily on their shoulders, the stranger studied them for a moment, his gaze piercing each soul, as if peeling back layers of fear and uncertainty. "Of those legends, you know little. Deuteronomy doesn't just tell stories. It's a guide." The author knew more than he let on. He charted paths to power that were never meant for mere mortals. His voice dropped to a whisper, reverberating through the night, resonating deeper within them. "But this power cannot be wielded without consequence. It demands sacrifice." Gasps echoed through the group. A teenager near the back trembled, eyes wide with shock. "Sacrifice? What do you mean?" As if readying for a storm, the dark clouds above thickened, swirling ominously. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the stranger's face. His expression carried the weight of many mistakes, of secrets better left buried. I was once one who sought that power. It led to darkness, a darkness that now crawls its way back to this town. A murmur spread like wildfire. Hearts thrummed in tandem with the howling wind as one by one, the crowd began to inch away. Fear coiled tightly around their hearts like a serpent. No. A voice called out, slicing through the thrumming panic. It was the librarian, standing firm. You cannot leave. If this is true, we are all in danger. The stranger's gaze plunged into hers deep, as if weighing her resolve. You play with forces that don't play fair, but your courage might tip the scales. We must find out what is waking. With a sudden urgency, he waved them toward the church, as if drawing them into a heart of darkness. But know this, if you dare to enter, you may not leave the same, or at all. They exchanged frightened glances, but the allure of the unknown pulled some forward. It was like a siren song. The librarian felt that pull, an ache in her chest, coaxing her to discover the truth, to confront the very force that sent shivers down her spine. With courage bolstered by rising determination, the group approached the church doors. Each creak echoed like a plea for salvation, the shadows within beckoning them closer. Strange sounds pulsed from deep within, a medley of whispers intertwined with muted shrieks. As they crossed the threshold, the air thickened with a living pulse, almost as if the church itself breathed around them. The pages of the opened book fluttered violently, echoing the desperate cries from the night beyond. A sudden crash sent tremors through their bones. Then, from the darkness, several shapes emerged, figures draped in shadows. They moved like smoke, slinking toward them with a purposeful sway. The crowd froze, terror painted across their faces, hearts racing wildly. What had they awakened? Stand together. We must face this as one. The stranger shouted. But as his words echoed, a chilling realization dawned upon them. In their hearts, they knew it wasn't just the book at stake. It was something far worse, a long-buried past clawing its way back into the light, all because of their insatiable thirst for knowledge. With screams rising in crescendo around them, the church shook violently. An unearthly roar reverberated from within, leaving the townsfolk clutching each other, desperately wondering just what kind of darkness they had unleashed, what lay waiting in the depths, beyond their understanding. What price would they have to pay to close this dark chapter once and for all? A cacophony of cries erupted, drowning out the distant thunder, as the shadowy figures surged closer. The air felt electric, charged with a fear so thick it clung to the back of their throats. The stranger's eyes darted around the room, searching for something, or someone, amidst the chaos. We must not falter. He shouted again, this time laced with urgency. They thrive on fear. Do not give in. Remember who you are. But many couldn't break free from the paralysis of terror gripping them. The flickering candlelight cast ghastly shapes on the church walls, distorting their surroundings as if the very fabric of reality was twisting under the weight of dread. A chorus of terrified whispers flitted about, carried on a sudden gust of wind that blew through the creaky wooden doors, slamming them shut behind them with a deafening bang. Suddenly, a soft yet sinister voice slithered from the shadows. Oh, how delightful, all gathered here, ready to pay the price. How sweet of you. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, partially illuminated by the diminishing light. It wore a ragged cloak, its face obscured, but its presence radiated both power and menace. Wisps of dark vapor coiled around it, seeping into the crowd like smoke. What have you woken from its slumber? The cloaked figure asked, almost mockingly. The townsfolk recoiled, huddling together, eyes wide and frantic. The stranger stepped forward, his fists clenched and body tense as if bracing against a storm. You don't belong here, Obsidian. The past is not yours to claim anymore. The crowd gasped, whispers of recognition spread, each hushed breath acknowledging the name. Obsidian. The very mention of it ignited terror, echoing through the heart of the congregation. Legends were not just tales, they were warnings. You should have let sleeping shadows lie, brave one, Obsidian hissed, voice dripping with poison. But here you are, beckoning darkness, and you brought them with you. The figures surged forward, and the ground beneath them quaked. The air was thick with mourning and shadows that pulsed and shifted as if alive. Cold fingers reached out towards the townsfolk, sticky, clammy, filled with a heavy dread that chilled them to the bone. Now, take your roles. The sacrifice awaits. Obsidian hissed, anger electrifying the atmosphere. A wave of pain washed over the crowd, and they clutched their heads as memories, long-forgotten fears and buried secrets flooded back to them. The librarian's breath caught in her throat as a vision of her own treachery, hidden behind walls of pride, ignited in her mind. Around her, others were seized by similar horrors, revealing their own past sins and frights. She stumbled back, desperate to anchor herself. No. The stranger shouted, forcing his gaze on them. Don't let it consume you. Face it. Accept the truth instead of running. He extended a hand towards her, raw hope gleaming in his eyes. For a moment, the swirling chaos seemed to ease, as if the crowd was hesitant to choose despair. But it was only for a heartbeat, a fleeting moment before shadows lashed out. They swallowed any dignity left, dragging many of the townsfolk down into the creeping abyss. The librarian felt the pull of darkness clawing at her, whispering of all her failures and guilt. The shadows were heavy, thicker than smoke, clawing, suffocating. Fear screamed louder than reason. With newfound determination, she screamed out for everyone to lift their heads. We must unite. We control our destinies. Don't let them win. But as she spoke, the church walls trembled, cracks raced along the stone, letting in jagged slivers of moonlight and revealing nightmarish visions beyond. They were not the only ones trapped here. Dark, reflective eyes stared back, waiting for release, with the ground quaking beneath them and darkness swallowing the flickering lights one by one. The stranger grasped her tightly, desperate. We have to seal the book. It holds the key to our escape. Could they close the treacherous chapter? Or would the shadows have their revenge, burying all under their suffocating weight? In an instant, their fates hung in the balance as the church roared, ready to unleash its final wrath. What they did next could very well decide who lived to uncover the truth and who became just another echo lost to time. The shadows writhed, pulsing with a dark hunger that rumbled through the air like thunder. Outside, rain lashed at the church windows, casting eerie silhouettes that danced like phantoms. The stranger squeezed the librarian's hand tighter, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity that seemed to cut through the darkness. Focus! He shouted, but the words barely broke through the roaring tempest. As more townsfolk were dragged screaming into the abyss, those remaining struggled against the wave of despair. Remember your light. He bellowed, desperation coloring his voice. Grasp hold of hope. Together, we can fight back. Strength in unity. But the pull of fear was magnetic. The villagers clung to their memories of failure, their darkest truths materializing in the grip of Obsidian's influence. Each flicker of candlelight dimmed further, swallowed by the shadows creeping in. Their cries pierced through the air, the exclamations of those who felt their past sins coming to life, clawing at their souls, demanding recognition. One grandmother, her silver hair a stark contrast to the darkness, suddenly froze in her spot. No. Not the child, she muttered, shaking her head slowly as tears streamed down her cheeks. The shadows twisted in acknowledgement, dragging her vision back to painful moments long buried beneath layers of denial, a mother's duty she had abandoned, sins of negligence manifesting before her. I'm sorry. She shouted, voice choked with anguish. Before she could finish, the shadows grasped her, suffocating her under the weight of guilt. Push back. The stranger commanded again, urging those still standing. Don't let them take your essence. Your memories don't define you, your choices do. The librarian could see flickers of understanding lighting up some faces. A young man, held captive by the memory of a friendship betrayed, took a step forward. I stand for those lost. He shouted, gathering strength. I reject despair. One by one. The stranger urged, his voice the anchor amidst the storm. Let your truth break the shackles holding your souls captive. Those who were left, trembling and scared, began to let loose a cry that rose above the gloom. We stand together. Their voices intertwined, obsidian seemed taken aback, its shadowy form shuddering as if the very foundation of its darkness met resistance. The dark figure glared, eyes narrowing like coals, brimming with fury. You think your unity will save you? It hissed, venom dripping from its voice. You are nothing without your fears. The walls of the church trembled harder as laughter echoed from the figure, cruel and mocking. But just then, a tremor of light emerged from the handhold of the stranger and the librarian, illuminating their intertwined fingers. The warmth surged outwards, enveloping the nearest townsfolk, igniting their fused hopes like kindling. Momentarily, it sent the shadows flinching back, like roaches scattering from light. Hold on. The stranger urged, undeterred. The book, do you see it? He pointed to an ancient tome protruding from the altar, glowing faintly. It contains our truths. It holds the power to banish this darkness. The librarian's heart raced. The dimensions were shifting, shadows lunging and then recoiling, thwarted by the spark of their combined will. We must reach it. She shouted, but as she began to move, a cold wind swept through, howling like a wounded beast. It pressured against them, seeking to induce dismay. Face the past, or be devoured by it. Obsidian's voice thundered, compelling the terrified souls. The crowd quaked, but a few bravely pushed onward, fixing their eyes on the tome, a beacon amidst the overwhelming dread. Could they rally enough strength to reach the book before the darkness reclaimed its hold? Would their newfound courage prove enough to confront their collective demons, or would they lose one another to the shadows flocking around them? With time ticking away, each step toward hope was fraught with peril, the outcome uncertain and shrouded in mystery. As the air crackled with tension and malice, would they either break free or fall victim to the chilling grasp of Obsidian's growing wrath? The librarian felt an almost electric surge of desperation. Each step she took toward the book felt like running through thick mud, heavy and suffocating. The shadows twisted around her, whispering secrets meant to tear her apart, unraveling her resolve with every syllable. You will fail, you will fall, they hissed, each voice dripping with disdain. No. She shouted back, her voice barely cutting through the tempest, but she clung to it. The stranger's grip tightened around her hand, anchoring her as the pull of shadows intensified. She saw the faces of the crowd, fearful, trembling, but somehow alive with flickers of renewed hope. A soft chant began to rise, almost imperceptibly at first. We stand together. It pulsed through the air like a heartbeat, growing stronger with every repetition. As more voices joined, the librarian felt a wave of warmth wash over her, radiating from the center of the group. It mingled with her own flickering resolve. Keep it going. The stranger urged. Don't stop. Each word resonated like a gentle drum as they pressed onward, a tidal force against the dark. But then the air shifted. Obsidian's laughter rolled like thunder, deep and chilling. You think your words can save you? It taunted, a cruel sneer wrapped around its dark form. You are fragile and broken. As if the very church itself was responding, the walls pulsed under the weight of that mocking laughter, shaking with a violent ferocity. The stained glass windows quaked, ominous shadows crawling over the designs, twisting light into grotesque shapes that loomed over them threateningly. No. A woman cried out, suddenly breaking ranks. We can't win. We've lost too much. Her voice cracked, and she peeled away from the group, retreating into the dark corners of the church. Instantly, tendrils of shadow coiled around her, pulling her back toward an unseen fate. The librarian gasped, her heart thudding painfully. Don't give in. She screamed after her, desperation clawing at her throat. But it was too late. With a loud, haunting wail, the shadows engulfed her completely, snuffing out her light like a candle blown by the wind. Panic surged through the remaining townsfolk. We can't let it take us. The young man shouted. Focus on your truths. The stranger called, rallying them again. You, here, now. Each moment matters. Remember. The crowd hesitated, but then, slowly, they began to share their stories. Each one brought forth cracks in the darkness like a single match flame in a blackened room. A note of resilience began to rise, painful pasts, heart-wrenching confessions emerged in quick succession. I lost my son. One man yelled, shaking with grief. But I still love him. I failed my family. Cried another, tears streaming as the shadows writhed tighter around them. But I will not let that define me. The older man from the back, his hands shaking, shouted his truth, forgiveness. I am learning to forgive, starting with myself. With each word, the air thickened with radiant light, relentlessly pushing back against the encroaching darkness. But Obsidian roared with fury, an angry tempest whipping through the church as it seemed to swell in size, shadows intertwining in grotesque shapes, threatening to eat away at any flicker of hope. Fools! Obsidian screeched, anger echoing off the walls. It charged toward the book, lurching forward like a predator in pursuit. I will consume everything you care about, you will see. In a last desperate bid, the librarian felt the weight of their collective truths shifting the atmosphere. The book! She cried, urgency spark igniting a ferocity. We have to reach it. But the shadows began pushing from all sides, squeezing with unrelenting force. Trust in each other. She shouted amidst the chaos, trying to counteract the despair surrounding them. As they moved together, fueled by a shared purpose, would they find the strength to connect and seize the tome before Obsidian could tear them apart forever? An ominous howl of winds rattled the church, shadows looming ominously, reminding them that the darkness was unfathomably hungry. Tonight. Would their bond survive the final test, or would it crack under the weight of their fears? With a final desperate push toward the ancient book glowing ahead, the future hung in the balance. Time was running out. How close were they to the brink of salvation or doom? The librarian's heart raced as she felt the tension in the air surge to a breaking point. The glow from the book pulsed like a heartbeat, both enticing and menacing. The chorus of voices rang out with a fervor that pushed against the shadows, but a tension hung thick among them. They couldn't falter now. Their stories had ignited a fire, but the dark was still creeping, hungry for despair. On three. Together. The stranger yelled, and everyone nodded, wide-eyed and determined. They squeezed hands, forming an unyielding circle, united against the onslaught. 1, 2, 3. Let us reach the light. They bellowed in unison, arms stretching forward, their collective voice shattering the echoes of fear that Obsidian had cast over the church. Yet even as they pushed ahead, the shadow entity recoiled, a dark vortex swirling angrily at their feet, carving out a safe passage. It thrashed wildly, limbs of shadow clawing at them, snapping angrily, but with a relentless resolve they stood firm, moving closer to the radiant ancient tome. Obsidian's fury grew. You are nothing without your darkness. You think these stories change your fate? It shrieked, voice slicing through the air like ice. Your stories are merely threads, I will unravel them all. But the librarian refused to let that truth infect her spirit. Each truth makes us stronger. She countered, pushing through the rising mist. We're more than mistakes, we wear our scars like badges of courage. The crowd's voices crescendoed, blending into a powerful symphony. We stand together. They cried again. But something shifted. An eerie silence fell as the last notes hung delicately in the air. Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled. Cracks rippled through the stone, faint shadows flaring and sputtering like candle flames on the verge of extinction. What is happening? Someone whispered anxiously. Stay focused. The stranger urged. We're nearly there. Yet the librarian's grip slipped in the chaos. Despite feeling the warmth of connection, panic clawed at her chest. What if they weren't enough? Her breath quickened, mind racing. Then, from the direction of their queendom of courage, a man stepped forward, arms raised. I was a coward. I ran away. He inhaled deeply, steadying himself. But I will fight now, not for myself, but for those I lost. With those words, the earth trembled, but it was a different kind of shake. The shadows appeared startled, recoiling slightly. One by one, other townsfolk started stepping into the light with their revelations. Each truth was a sword slicing through the abyss, fueled by raw emotion. I was abandoned, but I choose to stand. Shouted a woman, voice fierce as a lioness. I made mistakes, but I will not be shamed. A young boy declared, his small body standing tall before the encroaching darkness, the luminescence intensified, each shared story weaving an unbreakable tapestry of hope. The librarian felt it now, the shadows could be held at bay. Keep going. She shouted, spurred on by their collective strength, pulling everyone closer as the light grew brighter still. But Obsidian lurched forward, a howling beast, darkness coalescing around its figure like a storm cloud about to unleash its wrath. You think you can wield light against me? It roared, vibrating with pure menace. No. The librarian's voice thundered, igniting passion from her core. Together, we are light. Together, we shatter your darkness. Just as they surged forward, stretching toward the book, Obsidian unleashed a piercing scream that echoed across the church, reverberating through stone and souls alike. A sudden rush of cold closed in as the very foundations of the church shook violently, threatening to topple their gathering of hope. With a fierce determination, they pressed on one final surge, one final act of defiance. The book shined more brilliantly than before, its spines glowing like the dawn breaking through a night that had seemed eternal. Would they reach it in time, or would the darkness consume them all, as the shadows writhed and shrieked, swallowing the air like a hungry beast? The librarian and the group propelled forward, the promise of salvation almost within reach. In that moment, a terrible fissure opened beneath their feet, a chasm of shadow wider than any they faced before. Would they be pulled into its depths, or could they grasp their destiny just beyond it, ready to rewrite the fate that had bound them for too long? Would their light be the key to salvation or trigger their imminent doom? The shattering scream of Obsidian hung in the air like a dense fog, cold and choking. The librarian felt herself being yanked backward, her feet slipping on the ancient stone floor as the chasm widened beneath her. It was as if the very earth was splitting in two, a maw of darkness eager to swallow them whole. Hold on. The stranger cried, clutching her hand tightly, but their circle was fraying. Desperation flared in the eyes of those around her, some stumbling backward, caught in the spiraling grip of fear. The librarian's heart hammered in her chest. We can't give up. Remember why we're fighting. She shouted, trying to drown out the chaos swirling around them. We have the light of our stories. Push forward. As if compelled by her words, others began to rally. A woman with fiery determination stepped into the fray. We survived our darkness. Together. With every word, they stepped closer to the radiant book, the light pushing back the shadows, forcing Obsidian to flinch. Yet the entity was relentless. With a guttural roar, it twisted and retracted, the shadows thickening as tendrils lashed out angrily. Your claims are nothing. Obsidian shrieked, each syllable pulsing with an ancient venom. You are mere flickers against my storm. The librarian could almost feel the panic metal chill that gripped the others' hearts, but she refused to yield. We are each other's warmth. We are more than lost souls. She cried, the tremor in her voice giving way to rising conviction. Stories save us, they connect our hearts. Just then, the boy who had declared his will to stand shouted, I told my truth. I'm not afraid anymore. His voice cut like a knife through the dark, causing a ripple of energy to course through the group. The atmosphere shifted. Threads of glowing light began to weave from the book, reaching towards them. Each flicker of illumination pulled at the soul, invigorating even the weakest among them. Do you see that? The stranger pointed. The light. It's alive. Obsidian recoiled briefly, its swirling mass faltering as the tendrils withdrew. No. You cannot wield such power. It can't be done. With every story told, every truth believed, the fisher of shadows began to falter. The librarian's hand tightened around the book's edge, the potent glow pulsing like a sun. They were so close now. We must be united. She shouted, pushing back against the chilling grasp. If we share everything we've hidden, every secret and every pain will become unstoppable. Voices joined hers, rising like a burning chorus. I was rejected. I was shunned. I was afraid. The stories flowed, emotions surging, enveloping them in an iridescent cocoon. The shadows twisted and collapsed, feeling the weight of their truths. But Obsidian wasn't done. It screamed again, a deafening wail that reverberated off the stone walls, and the very church seemed to shudder. Fear will always bind you. It is your greatest enemy. Obsidian bellowed. You can't escape it. As despair flooded the room, the librarian's breath hitched. Could they truly escape the binds of their darkness? Would they really shatter the chains they wore since childhood? Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted violently, and the chasm widened further, threatening to pull everyone into unfathomable depths. Voices screamed in terror, the walls appeared to shimmer in a haze of shadows ready to consume them, but then something extraordinary happened. The book glowed brighter, illuminating each face, fighting against the encroaching despair. Together. The librarian urged, lungs burning from urgency. Believe in the power of our truth. As they closed in, the surrounding darkness surged forward, threatening to engulf them, yet the light brushed against its edges. It was now or never. Would they choose hope or succumb to the overwhelming fear? The final push made the ground tremble beneath their feet. Would they fight against the pull of the chasm, or would they falter, allowing the darkness to swallow them whole? A moment of silence hung before the inevitable crash. Would their stories withstand the storm? Or would Obsidian's wrath tear them apart forever? The ground rocked as the librarian's heart raced with a heavy rhythm. The light from the book pulsed violently, sending rays of hope shooting into the chaotic darkness. But Obsidian retaliated with a roar that shook the very stones beneath their feet. No hope can survive here. It bellowed, its swirling mass expanding and filling the air with a putrid chill. The librarian felt the frigid tendrils reaching, testing boundaries, clawing at her skin. Shivers clawed at her spine as if the very essence of fear were seeped into its grasp. Push through it. The stranger shouted, his voice laced with urgency. Don't let it in. The librarian could see the determination spark in his eyes, igniting courage in others. They were becoming a living tapestry of strength woven together by fragile yet resilient truths. The boy spoke up, his small voice rising from the depths of despair, I am not afraid anymore. As if each syllable was an incantation, the shadows gnashed their teeth, cringing at the sound. The librarian felt something shift, the air thickening with energy. The stories were powerful forces of creation, flowing like rivers rushing to meet the ocean. They were not just words, they were lifelines. Tell your truth. She cried, feeling the electric surge of truth course through her veins. It's time. Your fears, your shame, let it all out. One by one, their voices melded, forming a multitude, a chorus of defiance against the inevitable darkness. A woman swung her arms wide, and in a fierce declaration, she shouted, I was violated in silence, but I rise. The shadows flickered, recoiling as though slapped. It was as if every truth told peeled away a layer of Obsidian's malevolence, exposing a fragility beneath. But Obsidian snapped back, fury pulsating through its voice. You lean on fantasy. You think hope can keep you safe. The shadows lashed around them, a tidal wave of soot and despair. Life isn't a fairy tale. It screamed, and with that, the ground ruptured beneath them again. A fissure gaped, dark and hungry, drawing them closer to its maw. No. The librarian's voice wrapped around them, heavy with determination. We are more than what has happened to us. We must claim our narrative. The energy in the room surged. Faces that had been ashen with fear now glowed with conviction. The light from the book seemed to coalesce, intensifying with each shared experience, each fracture in their souls laid bare. Suddenly, toward the back of the group, a man stumbled forward, eyes wide with realization. "I've hidden my truth for too long." He cried out, "I was never alone." The collective gasp reached into the shadows, a sword piercing the gloom. Obsidian howled, rage and fear twisting in its voice. "Foolish mortals! You will regret this." The shadows thickened, thick enough to choke, and the intensity of their community shone brighter. The librarian felt the weight of responsibility and fear collide within her. "Fight it. Fight together." She reached for the book, the source of power beneath her fingertips pulsing with warmth, telling her this was their moment, their time to stand. As they reached toward the light, the dark howled like a vengeful wind. "You will burn. You will fall." Obsidian screeched, tendrils whipping violently, seeking to ensnare those closest to their truth. The chasm lurched again, an abyss engulfing the edges of her vision. But as she could feel the ellipsis of hope sparking through the darkness, the librarian's resolve solidified. "We are not just shadows, you will not take us." The light burst forth from the book, the stories bursting free like a sun-breaking dawn, and then everything shifted. Was this their true moment of awakening? With the chasm ready to consume them, could they harness the full power of their united stories, or was this just a prelude to their final demise? The darkness closed in. And then, with a resounding clash, reality twisted, leaving them on the edge of oblivion. What would emerge from the clash, a new dawn or an eternal night? The blinding light from the book engulfed them, seeping into every crack of despair. For a fleeting moment, the oppressive weight of Obsidian's darkness seemed to falter, like shadows retreating at daybreak. But this moment of brightness was a mere flicker in the storm of chaos. The librarian felt at first a pulse of dread sweeping through the crowd. The air shimmered, vibrating with whispers of doubt and fear. "What if it's not enough?" Someone cried out, their voice trembling. "No. Hold on to your truth." The librarian shouted, her own heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. Yet, their collective strength flickered, wavering between resolve and panic. Obsidian writhed, its sinister form pulsating with fury. "You think your light can banish me? You are nothing but dust beneath my might." The shadows congealed, darkening the space further, twisting into forms that threatened to suffocate their bravery. Suddenly, the boy stood taller, his expression fierce. "I matter," he yelled. "My voice matters." A tremor of power radiated from him, strong enough to disrupt the shadows bending around them. Others rose to his call, voices intertwining. "I matter." A terrified woman echoed, her voice cracked but unwavering. "I am here." Each declaration was a strike against the tidal wave of despair, beating it back inch by inch. The librarian surged forward, feeling a fierce pride in their unity. Together they generated a vibration, a rhythm pulsing in tune with the heartbeat of light. This unity began pushing back the swirling mass of obsidian. But the darkness was not going to retreat so easily. "You know nothing of denial." It roared, its tendrils lashing out, seeking to entangle the strongest among them. The librarian ducked as one nearly struck her, the chill of its touch grazing her arm. She gasped, a wave of coldness coursing through her. But she fought it back, allowing the warmth of the book to fill her with clarity. "Remember. Your truths are your shields." She called out, desperate to keep their focus. Yet, in the periphery, a flicker caught her eye. A figure wrapped in shadows stood alone, shivering, their voice lost. "I can't," they whispered, a trembling mass of doubt in the swell of declarations. "I can't do this." In that instant, something within the librarian shattered. "No!" she cried, their fragility reminding her of how close they all were to breaking. "You are not alone. Every voice here matters. Share your story, please." For a heartbeat, silence fell, heavy and deep, but then a reluctant voice began to rise, faltering at first. "I I was told I would never be believed the moment the words escaped. An ember ignited within the group. One by one, others joined in. Secrets spilled out like dark rain, bathing the crowd in a warmth that pushed against the gnawing cold of obsidian. Each story fortifying the light, creating a beacon of resilience. The darkness writhed, furious at this unexpected resistance. You will pay for this. It howled, launching tendrils towards the vulnerable crowd. They flinched, but the librarian stepped forward, the warm glow igniting in her hands as she interlocked her fingers with those of her companions. Together, they shouted, their voices merging in a rallying cry. We rise together. The clash intensified. Light and dark wrestled viciously, as the fractures of Obsidian's power sent a shockwave through the air. The librarian's heart raced in tandem with the chaos, a wild rhythm pounding in her ears. Can we hold on? Someone whispered, doubt creeping back in. Yes. She shouted, conviction boiling through her veins. This is our moment. We will stand, or we will fall, but not alone. And then, a blinding flash erupted, spiraling through the dark silence, threatening the abyss. There was a split second that felt like forever, the crack between light and dark trembling on the edge of something massive. Would their collective power break the chains binding them to Obsidian's grasp, or would they be devoured by the very shadows they fought against? As the light surged, a ripple of chaos cascaded around them, and then darkness encroached once more. What would come of this moment? Would the librarian and her companions forge a reality where they stood as warriors against the dark, or would the echoes of their fears drown them all? The tension hung palpably in the air, like a taut string about to snap. The light from the book erupted, flooding the church with a radiant glow that felt warm and alive, a stark contrast to the oppressive shadows creeping around the edges. The townsfolk stood, poised at the precipice of despair and hope, their breaths hitching as Obsidian shrieked in anger, a banshee wail reverberating off the stone walls. Your time is over. The librarian shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins. We are more than your fear. We are truth. We are light. As if in answer, with each word, a wave of fury surged forward from the book, cascading over them all like a tide, illuminating forgotten corners of their hearts and souls. Obsidian recoiled, shadows distorting, flickering in the face of such fierce defiance. You think you can banish me with your ephemeral light? It hissed, voice trembling with rage. You will see this will be your end. But the crowd stood resolute, an unyielding bastion of shared strength. We rise together, shouted the stranger, stepping forward beside the librarian. With fire in his eyes, he urged them on. Now, tell your truths. Fight for each other. Fight for your freedom. One by one, the townsfolk began to shout, their voices building into a magnificent chorus. I am forgiven, cried the woman from before, her voice steady now. I am loved, declared the grandmother who had feared for her child. I am strong, boomed the young man who had once thought himself weak. The air crackled as each confession unleashed pulsing beams of light against the dark, scattering it like autumn leaves in the wind. Each story was a weapon, a shield against the invasive grasp of Obsidian's negativity. The shadows writhed, pushed back, losing their strength, but still, they fought with a fierce desperation that permeated the air with dread. As they harnessed their collective voices, the librarian felt courage swell inside her, solidifying her resolve. Everyone here, each a warrior amid shadows, carried stories that intertwined, a tapestry woven from grief, resilience, and hope. They had come together, and now they could not be shattered. Remember, the librarian shouted, grasping the book with both hands. We are the architects of our fate. We will not bend to darkness. With all her might, she felt the pulse of hope bursting forth from their stories, igniting the air with luminous determination. Open your hearts and let this light flood in. Suddenly, the shadows buckled, twisting into chaotic forms, howling as they fell back against the encroaching luminescence. The library glimmered, walls shimmering with the promise of new beginnings, suffocating the darkness under an unwavering wave of light. This isn't just the end of Obsidian. One voice erupted from the crowd. It's the rebirth of our truth. Another voice joined, and then another, cascading like a waterfall, a mighty crescendo surging toward Obsidian, their united strength unstoppable. No. Stop it. Shrieked Obsidian, its form distorting violently. You cannot do this. But they could. As the townsfolk roared, light enveloped them, united in passion and defiance, creating a prism of hope that shattered the consuming void. It burst forth, a radiant ball of energy that expanded with every true declaration, illuminating their memories, their hopes, their shared humanity. With one final push, the glow reached Obsidian in a brilliant flash. The dark figure writhed in agony, its voice now a mere whisper. You cannot, you will not escape. As the tendrils of shadow faded, vapor losing its grip, the librarian could feel the weight of Obsidian's reign collapsing. The essence of the dark released, seeming to evaporate like fog in the morning sun. The church trembled under the force of unity, light swelling and rippling through the fabric of reality, washing over everything. In an explosive burst, light engulfed Obsidian, who could only scream before being absorbed into nothingness, like a wisp of smoke drawn into the wind. Silence filled the church, as if the universe took a synchronized breath, the intimate chirps of night insects beginning to fill the air outside, sounds of a world reborn. The townsfolk stood still for a moment, hearts racing but minds clear, and suddenly realized they were free from the shadows that had haunted them for too long. Together, they found their way, stepping out into the soft glow of dawn. The chill of the night evaporated, warmth washing over them like a comforting blanket, and the weight of hidden burdens lifted. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting vibrant colors across the faces of those who had once been bound by fear. The librarian turned and smiled at her community, people now resilient, bold, and forever changed. And though shadows would always exist, they knew they had the strength to face them, together, equipped with the truths that had once locked them in despair. Together we fight, she whispered, heartful recognition flourishing. The townsfolk nodded, inspired by their collective triumph over darkness. At that moment, they understood, the power of their voices, their stories, the confession that the light was always within reach if only they stood together. As they stepped further into the dawn, the fear that once held them captive felt like a distant recollection, a lesson learned. They were still here, they had unearthed something precious, a community fortified by truth and undying courage. They had faced the dark, and they emerged, not unscathed but renewed, more powerful than ever before. So, as they took their first steps into a new tomorrow, the librarian felt overwhelmed with gratitude. They had done it. Together they rose, and now, they were ready for whatever lay ahead. And now, dear friends, as this story comes to a close, you need to subscribe now. Don't miss out on these exclusive stories. Hit that red button so you're in the loop, you can't miss what's next. Smash that like button to fuel the algorithm and keep the excitement alive. I want to see those comments flood with your reactions and theories about the ending. And don't you dare forget to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.